Today I'm going to review the PrintFrog Glass Printmaking Baren. A Baren is a device used to help transfer ink from a relief plate or a woodcut onto paper. It's used instead of a printing press as a cheaper, more portable, and a little bit more versatile option. About a year ago, my wife and I bought a house, and recently we were able to move things around to sort of carve out an art studio for ourselves. I am just a hobby artist, but I did take some printmaking classes in college, and I had a lot of fun with it. And over the years, from time to time, I've picked the hobby back up for short periods of time. And now that I don't have to put everything away at the end of the day, I find myself doing it a little bit more often. From years ago, I have been using these tools as Barens. I think everybody has either started with or at one time used a wooden spoon whenever they've needed to do something. It's a very simple device, and it doesn't have to be a wooden spoon, but everybody's got something like this around their house that they can just use the back of to rub a piece of paper, transfer the image. It's very versatile, it's very cheap, everyone's got it around, but it doesn't always produce the best results. Some years ago, I bought the Speedball Printmaking Baren, which is nothing more than a wooden handle attached to a plastic sort of cup that you can use to press down and give pressure. Slides across the page fairly easily, but in my recent experience, I've not been getting the best result with this. I was at the local art store a couple weeks ago, and I found a new version of this. I did use it. I was able to borrow one, but I do not still have it, so I don't have a visual. But it's, aside from being a different color, it's essentially the same thing as this, except this bottom has some sort of cushion material. I don't know exactly what it is. And then over that is a sheet of Teflon to provide a smooth surface that doesn't damage the paper. But even that I wasn't terribly impressed with. I went searching online, and I found this on Etsy. This is significantly more expensive than any of the other options. But I hoped that this was going to make pulling a series of prints significantly easier. This has a couple of features that seem like they would naturally help. A, it's much heavier. B, it's just more comfortable and has an overall smoother finish than any of the other items. And I thought that would be a good fit. And once I got it in, I decided to do some testing to see if it was worth the money. So what I did was I did a series of these prints with each of the 4 items. These two are carved into Speedy Carve, a material from Speedball. And it's not dissimilar from the material that we've all become familiar with those pink erasers we had in school. If you imagine what cutting those with a sharp knife would be like, that's very much like these. It's a very easy process. This is a sheet of linoleum backed with, I believe it's Hessian cloth, but I could be mistaken. This is much more difficult to cut. It takes a lot more effort and a little bit harder on the wrist, but it tends to hold sharper details and can be a little crisper when printed. So here's what I did with each Baren. This is a wooden spoon. With the Evolution print, it did very well transferring ink evenly in the large flat areas, but as you can see on the arms, it seemed to have a little trouble with details. It's difficult to control the pressure with a spoon, and it's easy sometimes to press too hard, especially on these softer materials, and push ink down into those details. On the shield, the black areas aren't covered quite as well. This plate probably dried just a touch before I applied the paper. and that's why you see the texture of the paper in these areas. But it did hold up to the details fairly well. This was probably pressing with significantly less pressure than this. And then we have the Tiki Idol. It did really well picking up the details in the face, around the eyes. I left a lot of material behind to make it look a little bit more like a woodcut, even though it's from a linoleum block. And I think it did a really good job at picking those details up. But this is a difficult item to use as a Baren, and it gives inconsistent results. You have to kind of stay on the ball, or you will run into problems like details that got a little muddled. Next, we have the regular Speedball Baren. This one had a very similar problem on the Speedy Carve. And in fact, you can see here that the block moved while I was printing, or the paper moved. That's something that's really easy to do with an item that you have to apply your own pressure to. Because if you are applying pressure and you have a soft material underneath, you can cause it to buckle or bend, and either the paper or the material can shift, and this can cause this kind of thing. In addition, you can see it really didn't it didn't transfer the ink in the black areas quite as well. And as you can see, I had a very similar issue with the Speedy Carve here. And this is part of the reason I went looking for something else. This is very difficult to apply consistent pressure with. It's also kind of an awkward way to hold. Your hand gets tired, and that's part of the problem. I actually wind up holding it like this more often than not, and I don't think that's doing me any favors either. With the Tiki, I think it did better than the other two, but it still shows a lot of the same issues where some of the finer details were lost. This sheet was printed with the special Speedball Baren, and I have to tell you, I wasn't really impressed with this. It did do a better job on the Evolution print. The soft material that lines the bottom does make it harder to apply too much downward pressure. It gives a little bit of consistency there, and you can see on the finer details here and on the arms, it did transfer them well, but it did have issues transferring the ink, not nearly as many as the previous two items. And in the Tiki, I think it did a decent job, but in here, with all of these, it's very difficult to make sure you're applying the same amount of pressure over an entire print, especially if it's a larger print. And obviously here, there was just an area where it was difficult to see where I'd done before and where I hadn't, and I didn't apply enough pressure. It did a good job of keeping some of the detail in the faux wood grain that I tried to carve into the mouth. And while it does have some of the woodcut details on the Tiki, it doesn't have nearly as many as the wooden spoon had. And that's largely because the wooden spoon, by being a smaller area, you're able to press a little bit better into certain areas that you know have a lot of detail. And that brings us to the Print Frog. This one, I thought, did a respectable job. It has not only the best detail and the sharpest lines on the Evolution print, but it also has the blackest blacks. On the shield, you can see the points on the tail, and you can even see this little thread there that's in the carving material. And on the Tiki, it did a respectable job of keeping a lot of the wood grain. In the mouth, where I lost some of the wood grain, I was trying to apply extra pressure, and I think from my experimenting, I won't need to do that with this material. So not only did I like the results of this one a lot better, It also took less effort to produce, and that's in large part because of the design of this. It's heavy. This is about 2 pounds. I haven't weighed it, but it feels like it's about 2 pounds, and I believe the package said 2 pounds as well. 2 pounds is a good amount of pressure for laying on top of paper to transfer ink. I mean, you don't want to press the paper so much that you're deforming it. In addition, it has a large flat surface, so it's easier to apply even pressure over a larger area. This has a large surface, but because you have to press, you never know if you're pressing one side more than the other, forward or back a little bit more. It's hard to produce completely even pressure. Since you don't have to press down on this one, it's easy to provide consistent pressure, and the larger base also makes it a little bit more obvious where you've been on the paper. I have not had a chance to test it, but the write-up on Etsy also says that the handle side can be used as a smaller Baren if you need it, and even the edges. They're certainly smooth enough, and they're certainly large enough that that's a possibility. I just haven't had the need to do that. And also, this is a less comfortable way to hold it, but I don't have any inkings right now where a smaller area is going to be that beneficial. And as you can see, it's not as flat, so it's going to be a very specific targeted area. The large flatter area is much more conducive to running prints and doing them with a lot less effort. As far as the value goes, I'm not going to get into the price because the price can change. But it was more expensive than the others. But I think if I'm going to be doing a lot more printmaking, and if I want to do a series of prints where I do several in one day, this is going to be a lot less effort, a lot less fatigue on the wrists and the arms. And, you know, it's also a fairly attractive item to keep on your desk. It's made from recycled glass. It's hand blown, so it's a nice handcrafted item. Depending on your friend circle, I guess it's a good conversation piece as well. The Print Frog comes in packaged in a plain brown box, nothing special there. It's protected by some nice thick paper that looks like they've used it for printmaking practice, or they've specifically printed it up for this. I'm not sure, but it's nice paper that really feels like it's going to protect the glass from chipping. And also, if it's your thing, it's not mine, but if it's your thing, it comes with a lot of little free stickers. While I don't have a use for this kind of stuff, I appreciate that a company's trying to personalize their delivery a little bit. And I don't think that probably increases the price a whole hell of a lot. So that's it. That's the Print Frog. I think of the materials that I have available to me, this is by far the most comfortable, the most attractive, and produces the best results. Thank you very much. Happy printmaking.